Seems like every day I see like a different robot thing being tested for military service. I keep seeing more and more of these weird mini tank looking things or pseudo donkey four-legged affront to nature ones that are supposed to be able to run around and carry stuff. They all seem fairly capable in the videos. I mean, how hard is it to take a remote controlled car and slap a webcam and a 240 on top? But we have yet to see any of this operationally, so what gives? They said these things were going to be the next big thing 20 years ago. If you look around here on YouTube, just from the titles and thumbnails alone, you'd think we're constantly on the brink of robot World War III, but reality has proven that not to be the case, so why is that? When are they going to stop kicking the can down the road and give me the Orwellian future I deserve? Why don't we have robot armies yet? Let's get started. If you think about it, the majority of military technology, at least used for offensive purposes, is to ensure that we have to put in less effort to kill another human being while reducing their ability to do the same to us. If we assume that's what we're going for, robots are the logical conclusion of that line of thinking. They do all the dirty work for us while we sit ideally very far away from the actual fighting, hopefully next to a wall outlet so we can charge our phone. And this is what's made drones so efficient for countries that can afford them. And I mean these kinds, not these kinds. Some kid sits in an air-conditioned box in Nevada playing around with a joystick, and then somewhere in a different hemisphere, two guys riding a one-person scooter get atomized. We can talk about the ethical ramifications of that in a later video, but you gotta admit, the efficiency is off the charts. We've made war so efficient that the operators of these UAVs run the risk of becoming obese while actively engaging in a war. And if you're an American and that doesn't fire you up, I don't know what will. So where's the hangup? Where is my platoon of T-1000s? Believe it or not, we've been trying to figure this out since the 1980s. The Autonomous Land Vehicle Program, or ALV, was a broad initiative with the goal of building robots that could run around on a battlefield and really kick off the Skynet apocalypse ASAP, at least theoretically. As the name implies, the goal was really to create a series of systems that would automate some of the more basic soldier tasks that were necessary to perform, but are generally just distractions for combat troops from the actual fighting. Reading the report on this is actually mind-blowing, considering it's from March of 1986, and talks about needing to leverage recent advances in AI and the need to create a new generation of machine intelligence technology. I'm pinning this in the comment section, you should definitely go read it. The project had three main goals: an autonomous vehicle system that could do things like plan routes and drive the vehicle itself, the pilot's associate basically acting as a computer co-pilot that would replace the need for things like Rios in the back of F-14s, and last, the battlefield manager, which would do things like interpret reports from scouts or infantry and give suggested courses of actions to the commander. In short, it would perform a very basic first level of analysis from raw data that anyone with minimal training could do just to speed up the overall decision making. Now, given the fact that 30 years after this study was done, I would have to be yelling at my driver to wake up because we had to move battle positions. And then once we were at the battle positions, then I would get yelled at because I thought that the machine gunner would be on the 4th floor and they ended up being on the 3rd floor. We can assume that none of this actually really worked out. That said, the research and wargaming behind this study was the groundwork for what we would want AI-controlled soldiers to do. We want them to be able to take a bit of the mental and physical load off of troops for them to focus on things that require a bit more brain power. If you took a tank platoon and replaced all the drivers with computers, now you have 4 extra soldiers, which means you can now man an extra tank. Do that for an entire company, now you have an entire extra platoon of tanks you didn't have before. But Justin, these aren't robot killing machines. This is just Tesla self-driving slapped into a military truck. When are we going to get to the part where we push over walking computers that are carrying boxes? We'll skip ahead to 2003 with the creation of the Future Combat Systems Program. And you know it's going to be juicy info when the Wikipedia opening states how expensive it was and that nothing came from it. Spoiler alert that nothing came from it in case you've been asleep for like 21 years. Originally, the idea was to replace the fleets of M1 Abrams and M2 Bradleys with lightweight robotic vehicles. These would work as essentially a combination of AI handling some stuff and a human with a Mad Catz controller handling the other stuff, mostly shooting and whatnot. But this is actually like a way cooler idea than I think people realize. If you play arcade style shooters, you have one player doing all the driving, loading, and shooting for a tank. If you're in an actual tank, it takes 4 people all working in near perfect unison just to do simple maneuvers and shooting. The goal of the FCS was to basically make how vehicles work in video games a reality. You still had a human ultimately controlling everything, but in a much more streamlined way. Even if funding wasn't eventually pulled for these things to fund the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, there is one big flaw. In video games, guns don't jam, your external sights don't fail on you, and fixing damage is as easy as teleporting outside of it and just running around with a blowtorch to repair everything. Real life does not work that way. Chain guns jam, track gets thrown, and I have yet to find a type of engine failure that exclusively relies on turning on a power drill and rubbing up against a solid piece of skirt armor to fix it. In real life, it takes multiple people to fix these problems. Okay, maybe we don't want like an entire brigade of robots running around the battlefield shooting for us. What if we just want like one tiny thing to carry a machine gun and shoot stuff? Enter the Gladiator Tactical Unmanned Ground Vehicle, basically a tiny tractor with a thermal camera and an M60 machine gun strapped to it. And this style of robot soldier is the kind of default design that we've seen from its inception in 2005 up until today. They're basically just a crow system on tracks. And this seems like a good idea. Machine guns draw a lot of enemy attention, so if you can keep their attention on the robot and not the living people it's working with, it's a win-win. And it was protected against rounds up to 30 caliber fire. Here's the issue with that though. Everything that this thing did could be done better, longer, and a lot cheaper just by a human being. These don't do well outside of flat, wide open spaces. They're difficult and complicated to fix and lack the agility of a person. They're also expensive, prone to electronic warfare jamming, and take up a lot of logistical weight. A 21-year-old who operates on nicotine and sketchy bodybuilding supplements can do everything the robot can do better and be crammed in the back of an LMTV with minimal complaining. So maybe we don't use wheels or tracks. What about those like little walking freaky dog things they made a Black Mirror episode about? There are about a baker's dozen of these kinds floating around, and generally they're useful for one very specific and mindless task: carrying your shit. For those of you who don't know, 90% of what makes a good infantry soldier or marine is the ability to put on a heavy backpack and walk from point A to point B. There's a reason it's called maneuver warfare and not sit on an MRE box warfare. These, I would argue, have some pretty good utility compared to the other ideas of robots we've seen so far. Something I think people don't realize is that logistics affects your standard dismounted light infantry just as much as more mobile formations like mechanized and motorized units. Light infantry has to literally carry all of their own supplies, hence the joke that there's nothing light about light infantry. The human body can only carry so much weight, and you can only move a formation of soldiers as fast as your slowest troop can keep up on patrol. The more weight you tack onto someone's back, the more water and food they consume, the more likely they're going to be heat casualty or become injured, the shorter distance they can move, and the longer it takes for them to get there. Calories and water are to infantry as JP8 and lube is to an Abrams, to use like an SAT version of the idea. I don't know if that's actually in the SAT. I never took the SAT. Then add on the fact that by the time you're finished with a long movement, you're just smoked, meaning you're probably not going to fight as well. Finally, any tactical resupply runs you have to do, just add on to this, because you have to walk somewhere to go get them and then carry everything back. These mule type robots are a good answer to this, and they give you the option of either not having to carry your own stuff and therefore move faster and able to react to situations better, or just carry extra stuff that you couldn't before, like extra AT weapons, food, ammo, and Zin cans. Now, it's worth mentioning that older versions of this kind of idea, like the LS3 robotic pack mule tested by the Marines, really didn't work out, mostly because it sounded like an actual mule, if you were killing said mule slowly with a sharpened MRE spoon. It goes without saying that if you're a good little trooper and trying to obey the first characteristic of the offense, maybe don't have a machine in your formation that produces roughly 10 bajillion decibels. Also, whoever made the concept art for this must have just put in their 2-week notice, because this is insane. Now, the army took a bit of a different approach, opting for their robots to have wheels. These were also called mules, but in all caps because, of course, it's an acronym, which stands for Multifunction Utility / Logistics and Equipment, because sure, why not? Now, these were bigger, but had impressive carrying capacities of up to 2,400 pounds, and were seen as kind of a mixture of gun platform and equipment carrier. Older models were wheeled, but in recent years, they've returned to a tracked layout and significantly increased the size. In 2022, the DoD actually received 33 separate bids in order to find a design that checked all the boxes they were looking for, under the Ground Vehicle Autonomous Pathways program. And recently, they even chucked one out the back of an airplane so that soldiers would stop calling it a leg. Looking at platform prototypes like the MISS UGV going cyclic on a 50 might cause your eyes to light up that we're one step closer to actual fighting robots. And unlike previous designs that use just general man-portable weapons, a human being is not going to be able to pop in and out of cover quickly while firing a 50 cal. And I'm standing by that. I don't care what lies you've been fed by the mainstream media. But what about that one video of the Russian robot going akimbo with Glocks? That seems to be exactly what we're looking for here. Real quick, why does the robot need flashlights on its pistols? I feel like killer robots should have some kind of night vision built in, but I digress. This guy had a name, by the way, Fedor, or Final Experimental Demonstration Object Research. And as cool as a gun-toting humanoid robot is, out of everything we've talked about so far, these are by far the least practical. I don't care what kind of unobtainium anti-grav technology you're able to slap into this thing, you are not going to have a human-shaped robot carrying a 50 cal and all of your platoon's equipment. Humans evolved into the shape we're in now to cover long distances slowly on foot while carrying a stick, not rolling back and forth at 20 miles per hour with 2,000 pounds of mortar ammo. The sad reality is that the more boring and mundane the design of these things get, the more practical they generally are on the battlefield. Yeah, you can point to Boston Dynamics and their robots, but those aren't really designed or intended to run around in a war zone. That said, I'm still going to be scared when they become self-aware. Look, I know your pain. I feel it too. I wanted giant robotic walkers as well. It's just not practical. I don't want to lie and give you false hope that it is. But what about problems that people generally don't think about with robot soldiers? Making a robot durable and practical enough to last in a firefight is pretty self-explanatory, but why don't we just hook one up to the Snapchat AI messenger and let it loose with a flamethrower? This is personal conjecture, but I don't see a foreseeable future where we don't have a human being at least being the one to pull the trigger or not. We can let them follow us around autonomously, but when bullets start flying, odds are someone's going to be pulling out a remote control. Simply put, using artificial intelligence to make kill, no-kill decisions in small unit tactical situations is not something I see anyone signing off on anytime soon. It's a massive risk that I don't think anyone's willing to take right now. The military loves eliminating risk where it can, and if Robo Soldier decides to go off the rails and shoot a bunch of friendlies, or just more likely doesn't identify and engage targets as it's supposed to, the blame is going to fall too high up for people to be comfortable. Also, I don't know about the ethics of allowing a robot to decide who gets to live and who dies, but you guys came here to listen to me talk about killer robots, not wax poetic on whether a robot follows Kant's categorical imperatives. But anyway, I read every comment regardless of what my therapist tells me to do, so make sure you leave one and tell me what you want to see next. Thanks for watching, subscribe, I'll see you in the next one.